Call to order. We have electronic participation by a school board member. Is there a motion to approve
Approve.
electronic participation?
Approve.
Second.
Lowry? Dr. Day, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Jalil,
Yes.
Dr. Day,
Yes.
Dr. Gupta,
Yes.
Mrs. Preston,
Yes.
Mr. DePaul,
Yes.
Mrs. Laurie,
Yes.
Dr. Tinsley.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Mr. Corner will join. I think he was stuck in traffic in Northern Virginia, so he'll join us.
Oh.
And Mr. Andrews is
Unavailable.
unavailable today. So pledge of allegiance, Dr. Day.
Rise to the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Day. Next one is agenda approval for public hearing and work session. Is there a motion to approve the agenda for public hearing and work session?
Approve.
Mrs. Lowry?
Second.
Dr. Day? Dr. Day, go ahead.
I do have a couple items from the consent agenda that I want to pull out for discussion. Should I
Right.
do that now or do it later?
You can pull it out now.
So the items I want to pull out for discussion, these are all among the policies that being considered. Under the HR policies, I want to talk about policy GC. The curriculum instruction policies, I want to talk about IKFA. And the finance-related policies, I want to talk about policy DA.
Did you do the custodial?
So when we approve consent, the assumption will be these three policies are not part of that
Yeah, and then we'll discuss them separately.
separately. All right, is there
So that's, I guess, a motion to amend the agenda, is it? Does that
a, yes,
require?
motion to amend the agenda, yes. I second the motion. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Jalil,
Yes.
Dr. Day,
Yes?
Dr. Gupta,
Yes.
Mrs. Preston,
Yes.
Mr. DePaul,
Yes.
Mrs. Laurie,
Yes.
Dr. Tinsley.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Dr. Day. Is there now we are back to the main motion? Is there a motion to approve the agenda? We already had a first and second.
Yeah, we did.
So go ahead. Could you please call the roll?
Mr. Jalil,
Yes.
Dr. Day,
Yes?
Dr. Gupta,
Yes.
Mrs. Preston,
Yes.
Mr. DePaul,
Yes.
Mrs. Laurie,
Yes.
Dr. Tinsley.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next one is budget public hearing, fiscal year 25-26 budget public hearing. Dr. Day.
Okay, so this is a public hearing only for comments related to the budget, not for other issues. And we have just, I don't think I need to read the entire public comment policies. We just have two individuals who've signed up. And so the first of those is Nettie Webb.
Good afternoon. So good evening, school board members and Superintendent Copeland. Many of you probably recognize me from last year, but for those who don't know me, I am the daughter of a teacher who's given 30 years to Lynchburg City Schools. I am also one of the leaders of Save Our Schools from last year, and I've had the privilege of being the long-term sub at TC Miller for both kindergarten and special education. I stand before you all today to call in and not call out, to invite each one of us to envision the future of Lynchburg City Schools that we know will be the brightest and the best for our students, but then also for the community, to see Lynchburg City Schools, but also Lynchburg as a whole to flourish. I invite us to also envision not just what has been done before, but looking at what we have currently, how we can improve what we have with the resources we have to see those 21st century situations without having to buy the flashy price tag technology. This is something I've thought a lot about with my engineering background, with my other disciplines, and I think it's something that if we come together, both with community members, but also the school board, with administration in the city, we can come up with a plan for these budget increases that I would discuss, because that's what it comes down to for the budget and the proposal to City Council. And what City Council has asked for really is real plans with detailed explanations with why this would work how it's going to work and a timeline in order to give funds. They don't want to just say, here's a blank check, and you guys will have as much money as you want to do whatever you want. And so this is an opportunity not to say, oh, they say school closures before, they've said this before, but to really see what we can make happen and what we can do. Last year, we embarked on the journey of a lot of investigations, research, and proposals. Community raised its voice. And last year, just when the Darrington and T.C. Miller decision was put out, we had over 3,000 community members sign a petition for just those two schools to not close them. At this point in the letter that they signed, it was a statement that they wanted to invest in Lynchburg City schools. These are community members that wanted their voices to be heard, that wanted to see that investment there. And so that's something also when we're thinking of community feedback, of what the community wants for our students. And I want to call in and pull from what Member DePaul said last September, because this starts with the MGT proposal. And Mr. DePaul said very wholeheartedly that the plan lacked depth, that we need to go back. There's conversations of asking again MGT for more money for those points, or more money for going back to MGT for further consideration. We had those conversations. It didn't go anywhere, but it is also concerning then that the proposal to repurpose T.C. Miller is on that very foundation, that the recommendation is built on is very shaky. If you look through the rest of that proposal, it is a ChatGPT version of educational best practices. It's, if you look, it wouldn't be something that I believe, when reading it and the draft, would pass through an AI detector. It's something that wasn't defined to Lynchburg City schools. They didn't do a complete analysis. They didn't even give offerings that could be easily applied to Lynchburg City schools in a reasonable timeline. So I do not, and I urge you to not base the information that you're doing for decisions off of their resources, because we've all agreed at points that they were faulty, that they weren't thorough, and that we needed more investigation. Some other points, though, on the budget, when we're considering closures of schools, is that we need to really evaluate that some of our demographic data is based off of historic projections. It doesn't take in the influence of all three colleges we have in Lynchburg having alumni stay, and that the fact is our generations are having children a little bit later, a half decade to a decade later. So now that boom of kids that are coming into Lynchburg City schools, they're coming now. Students are going to their schools to register at some of the schools and being said, you need to go to another school because these classes are at capacity. So that's something that we really need to take seriously. We tried to emphasize this last year, but this notion of being underutilized needs to be investigated, that we can't get to 100% utilization. MGT said point blank, not even 90% utilization, because you will have the decrease in academic quality and the function of buildings. So that's just something with these classroom sizes to consider. And financially, if you have K-5 under the student's 18, over a student's 13 years in Lynchburg City schools, then it is proven from other districts and research, you will save $12,000 per student over those 13,000 years. So long-term vision, emphasizing and really funding early education, K through 5, pre-K through 5, will save the district money. And that's the scope we have to have, is this long-term vision and not just the monetary now. And I think if we present the long-term vision to the city council with detailed plans, they will be much more susceptible to work with us. But thank you for going over.
Thank you. Our second speaker is Kathy Webb.
Good evening, School Board and Dr. Copeland. I'm that mother that's been here for a long time. I currently teach first grade at T.C. Miller, and what I see as the most important thing is to, number one, tell you guys thank you for the last couple of years where you have gotten us raises. Because I was here in the very bleak years where there wasn't anything for a long period of time. And not until just the last couple of years has that retirement looked a little bit better for the rest of my days. But I also want to say, in budget-wise, is that we lost a lot of people because of the fact that the counties are coming in higher than we are. A lot of good people, and after being in the situation that is at TC Miller right now, where we lost all staff but 3 licensed teachers and only 1 that was in the classroom, it really is important, number 1, that we think about what we're going to pay the people who we're trying to attract. And number 2, that if you go ahead with these school closures, please, please think about those people that are sitting in those buildings. Please think about the transparency, because that cost a lot last year come May. Because after the school board and the city council meeting, we probably lost almost our entire staff in just that next week. So it really does matter that you are timely, because if you wait till May, they don't have the opportunities to go and get that job that they might like. They're going to get the jobs that are left. And that was a very scary point in time. So if we're going to go ahead and let people go, I just come to you to say, if that's going to be the budget and that's what's going to happen, please come to them in March. They deserve that right to be able to go out and try to get a job that they would really, really like to enjoy and continue to go through, than to wait to see where you might be placed. That's very scary for some of them who have been doing one job for 20-some years, and they don't know what's going to happen. So I just implore you to please respect those, whatever place it is, because that became the scariest time in a lot of people's lives. We went through it, and I just would hope that it wouldn't happen again this year. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Day. That basically brings to the closure of public hearing, right?
Yes,
And is there a motion to adjourn public hearing section?
I move that we close the public hearing section.
Mr. DePaul, are you seconding the motion?
Oh, yes, I second it.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Jalil,
Yes.
Dr. Day,
Yes?
Dr. Gupta,
Yes.
Mrs. Preston,
Yes.
Mr. DePaul,
Yes.
Mrs. Laurie,
Yes.
Dr. Tinsley.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Mr. Connor has come
I
online.
don't see him.
Thank you. The next one is special presentation, Fall 2024 Custodial Assessment Awards, Dr. Copeland.
Dr. Wodeka. Yes, sir, thank you. Actually, so a couple of our custodians might be running a little bit late. I wonder if, could we do the audit first, and then hopefully they'll make it. I think they were planning to come about 5:30, so.
That's fine.
Great.
We'll do fiscal year 24 audit, Dr. Copeland.
Ms. James, do we have our auditor here to give us the brief?
Yes, sir, we absolutely do. Chris Murray is here. He's the director with Brown Edwards, and he was the overseeing auditor for the LCS 2024 audit, and I will turn it over to him.
All right. Good evening. As you said, I'm Chris Murray. I'm a director out of our Lynchburg office. Oversaw the schools and the city's audit this year and for the last several years. I'd like to start by thanking Sonia for her work during this audit process, getting through her first audit with us. The process begins all the way back in May or June, doesn't end until last week when we released the audit. So I'll give you a brief overview of what was released as part of the audit. Your financial results, financial information was issued within the city's financial report, which is because of your relationship as a component unit of the city. That's how it's reported. For the city and the schools, we issued a clean, unmodified opinion, which is the highest opinion you can receive. So that's a good, very positive note there. Another significant part is the federal expenditures. We looked at your federal grants, or look at federal grants to the city and the schools combined. Overall, there's about $55 million spent between the city and the schools. We tested one grant at the schools, and that was the ESSER grant, which is the emergency relief, the ARPA money. So it was about $14 million that was tested here. There was no findings or recommendations related to your federal grants. Switching gears, we issued 2 letters. One's called the Required Communication with Governance. It lets you know what our responsibilities are, what the school's responsibilities are. It lets you know whether we had any disagreements with management, which we're happy to say there weren't any of those. Finally, we issue what's called a comments on internal controls and other recommendations. So we see this as kind of a value-added tool where we can make different recommendations. So there's going to be potentially new comments or status of prior year comments. So there's no new comments this year, but following up on the comments from previous years, there was one last year for timely reimbursement of grants, which impacted your accounts receivable balances, which impacted your cash balance. That was a big recommendation last year. However, you'll see in the letter this year that that was not noted in the current year. There was one comment about timely financial reporting and reconciliations from last year that was repeated this year. Of course, we want to live in a world where there's no recommendations. However, that just doesn't always occur. It happens at times, especially in situations where there's significant turnover in management, especially finance department. When there's a big turnover, it happens. It doesn't mean it can't be corrected, and I think it can be. So management has already outlined different steps they plan to take to implement those recommendations to try to prepare for fiscal year 25 as we go forward. So that's the only comments we had about the audit, and I'll take any questions you might have.
You okay with board members asking you questions, Mr. Murray?
Sure.
Any questions for him or Mr. James?
Do we all have a copy of this at hand?
Yeah, it's
Yes,
posted to the agenda.
It's, what page?
It's on the agenda. It's on page 5 of the agenda.
G2.
Other questions for Mr. Murray? So the recommendations you have, you're taking them, reconciliation is important and the reimbursement is important.
Yes, sir.
That could create imbalances. So how do we compare to the neighboring school districts? I know you gave a clean check, so just for the public to hear where LCS stands. You do a lot of audits, right? Higher education and K through 12.
Not me specifically. I do mostly local governments that have different schools, and some have school components, some don't. Do a lot of towns and counties that don't have schools reported. It happens. I mean, there's some that haven't had a comment in years and years and years, and that's happened here and at the city before. It just, there are times when there's turnover that things can get out. It takes time to make sure the processes are in place, because the job just gets more and more complex. Massive accounting standards and stuff. It's just so many processes in place and monitoring that has to be done. It's a lot. So there's lapses happen, and then especially with the turnover, it needs to establish those processes and be ready for the audit and having your numbers adjusted. So there's to say that we do have them with those recommendations. We have plenty, and we have plenty that we don't even issue a management letter because they didn't have any recommendations. But likely somewhere that finance person's been there for 25 years, and it's just old hat getting the stuff adjusted for us. So
That's a nice way of not breaking confidentiality rules.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
I had one counselor try to get me to grade them against other ones, and as you can imagine, we can't do that.
Thank you. We appreciate you, sir. And
All right.
Ms. James, thank you for all the hard work.
Yes, sir.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
The next one is the Custodial Assessment Awards. Dr. Copeland again. Dr. Warka is doing all right.
Well, thank you, Dr. Copeland, and good afternoon or evening to members of the board. Don Floyd is grabbing some folks from the back. Thank you for the opportunity to do one of my favorite things that we do twice a year, and that is recognizing some of the most under-recognized members of our school community, and those are our custodians who do so much work to make sure that our learning environment is as high quality as we possibly can. So those of you who have been on the board for a little while, we've done a few of these now, and those of you who are new, we're always so proud to do this, and we really appreciate the time to come before you and celebrate our custodians, particularly those who have been really successful and those who have made significant growth over the last time that we did the assessment. So as a school division, we're always thinking about growth, and that's one of the things we do here. We've also included now an alternative school component as well as an overall improvement. So that's Floyd.
Me too.
Good evening, Dr. Copeland, Dr. Gupta, school board members. Thank you for this opportunity again to celebrate our custodial staff and the hard work they do for the schools every day. This is an important thing, and we have seen this awards program really bears some good fruit, some competition out there, and people want that award back. So, what I'll do is I'll start off with, let me get the most improved. Now, we have divided the two groups into the division into two groups, secondary, elementary, and now we've added alternative. But we've also added one award for somebody who's just made a lot of improvement from the last time. So that school, the most improved school, is for Lincoln Elementary, and I do not believe they're here. Principal Dr. Gozlowski and the head custodian is Lester Green.
Lester must be busy cleaning.
I know he
always is.
Lester is one of our veterans for sure. The next is the School of Distinction for the alternative sites, and for that award goes to Laurel Regional. And all right. Now we'll go into the elementary level, and our honorable mention school, and this is sort of a second place, but our honorable mention goes to Sheffield Elementary. Lisa Lee and Thomas Orr is the head custodian. All right, the School of Distinction. This award, this time for the elementary, goes to Heritage Elementary. Principal Sharon Anderson. There you go. And our head custodian, Lenore Herndon. Lenore Herndon. Thank you.
So this is particularly great because Heritage Elementary has had some staff turnover and some changes there. So really, really proud of all the hard work they've done to make that happen there.
Definitely. All right, honorable mention at the secondary level. Let's see, honorable mention at secondary level is Lincoln Middle School. Principal Dr. Kathy Gills, and they have a new head custodian, Miss Rivera, and they also had an interim, left my notes over there, who did a great job bridging. We had a retirement of a veteran who retired, and she did a great job. So the School of Distinction this time is for Dunbar Middle School. Principal Kelly Baldwin and her head custodian, Montague Sparrow. Good job. So thank you guys for the opportunity. Like I said, this is this award ceremony has really kind of got some traction. We've got some real competition going in the schools. And also, let me just show again, we've got the awards for the top winners. We'll be giving them to. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vodka. And next one is the fiscal 25-26 operating budget discussion, Dr. Copeland.
As we begin the long road of the next fiscal year's budget discussions, we are in the early phases of developing what the budget's going to be. More development will be done in the coming meetings in January, moving towards the City Council getting their budget presentations towards the end of February and early March. We've got some initial discussion points that we want to go over with, so I turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, members of the school board. So just so you're all aware, I had a discussion with the Facilities and Finance Committee at our last meeting regarding some communication that I received from the city, kind of moving the timeline for budget numbers up. They would like for LCS to provide our preliminary budget numbers by January the 7th, which increases the timeline. I do believe Dr. Copeland communicated with them that we did have a school board meeting on the 7th, and that we would like for the school board to at least review the numbers prior to them going over to City Council to review. So I do have the ability to turn them in on the 8th. We will be, for the next month, pulling those numbers together and providing them to you via Dr. Copeland to review. What they are requesting of us is their standardized tool that we submit to the city every year, which is those 7 pages of functional categorical numbers. So those are the ones that we are creating to fill in and pulling all the budget numbers to do a draft submission to them, which will go to them by way of you reviewing it first. So I'll entertain any questions or any suggestions on what you would like to see developed into or included into the FY26 budget request.
I'm gonna, go ahead, you gonna say something?
There's one other piece of this puzzle that we should get this week. The governor should release his budget tomorrow. Sometimes it might not be tomorrow, it might be the next day. But between now and Friday, we will get what the governor's presented budget is going to be. The significance of that is that allows us to see what he's prioritizing within the education space and how that's going to roll forward into the legislature and the assembly discussions that will start occurring in January. So a couple of rapid fire things that will occur that will help us frame what our request to the city is going to be. And we're at that point of input and discussion amongst the board as to where you want to see priorities and focus.
The governor is presenting his budget at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow. I plan to be there. But within real time, at that time, it should be public for anybody who wants to see amendments are. This is not a biennium budget. You know, there'll be a lot of amendments to the previous year's budget. But I want to start, normally I take the last one, but I'm gonna take the first bite on this one. Like a broken record, Ms. James and Dr. Copeland, we need minimum $17 this year. And we need minimum 50,000. I know Mr. Andrews is not here today, but that should be the marker. And we know that last year we used $2 million of coronavirus money. So we'll be starting the fiscal year with $2 million in hole. With governor's 3% proposed increase for teachers, it'll cost us about $1.5 million. That takes our deficit to $3.5 million. You see where I'm going? Mm-hmm. So people say ask from city council. That's the bare minimum ask, $3.5 million. And if you do 1750, it's just like 1.1 million, or
Yes.
1.1 million to do 1750. That takes the ask to $4.6 million. And we need some more bus aids. And Mr. Connor is not. Is he here?
Yeah, he's here.
Okay, I'm going to speak up for him. But so you add those numbers, it easily adds up to $5 million. So we got to keep that in mind. We keep as promising salary increases and they are not coming through. They are not beating the inflation. I go to grocery store. I used to take a handful of money and buy a bag full of groceries. Looks like I'm taking a bag full of money and buying a handful of groceries. That's the fact. I don't want to name my grocery store on Timberlake Road. That's how And that's how I think everybody feels. I don't know how you guys feel, but just buying milk, yogurt, and few vegetables cost me arm and a leg, which is not good. And our employees should not be working 2-3 jobs to pay for their bills. I always cite an employee who works in this building. I talked to him several times, and he works in the evening shift, and he said, I said, you're not going home for dinner? He said, no, she'll bring me dinner here so I can go to my next job. That should not happen. So 17, I know it's still low compared to, the inflationary pressures, but that should be our bare minimum increase. I'm shut up and I'll open the floor. Dr. Day, go ahead.
This is frustrating because it's such a short time frame. We can hardly think about it between now and then. How soon would the board have anything to look at regarding this?
Well, I'm currently working on the requested increases from Dr. Gupta. I plan on working through Christmas and trying to get those numbers to you as quickly as possible. As you understand, the salary and benefits piece are the most complicated piece because there's a lot of moving parts and there's not just a button that you can press from our financial management system that gives you all of these different variables that we're considering. So I will have those numbers to you as quickly as I can.
Yeah, and I'm not
via
frustrated
Dr.
with you,
Copeland.
you
Yes, sir.
understand. It's
I
with the
understand. Yes, sir.
circumstances. Have we received requests from the individual schools about what they need financially?
Yes, sir. I have actually met with all of the schools, and I have lists, and they have provided me with their requests that I am going to incorporate in one document and potentially, if approved by the school board, include those in the draft preliminary numbers as well.
Just to, sorry to interrupt, but the problem this year is normally these things happen in February, right? As per our budget cycle. So everything has been upped 2 months. We were taken by surprise that the deadline is January 7th, and we got Christmas break in between. The schools close this Friday. The kids don't come back till January 6th. So that's what pushing us to discuss it tonight. We are not trying to be non-transparent or anything. It's just the pressure of the system on us. Dr. Day, go ahead.
Well, I guess what I was wondering is it possible to squeeze in an additional meeting before the 7th, so we have a time to look at this?
Let's see how the numbers come, what they have.
So when things are available for the board to look at, we should distribute them to the board as soon as possible, so each of us individually can start looking at it.
Real time, we'll have it.
And one last comment, I think it's hard to put specifics on this in such short notice, but the academic performance of our students, I think, needs to be the #1 criteria for what we request in our budget. But it's hard, again, on short notice to put specifics on that. But in my mind, that's the priority.
Yeah, I agree. Mr. DePaul.
Good.
Go ahead.
It seems to me that we have had draft versions of budgets that included these numbers before. 50,000 and 1750. We can use those draft versions as a template. That should not be this difficult. I don't mind having an extra meeting, that doesn't bother me at all. Or we can do it in committee, and we can bring that back as a motion. So if we want to do something, come to the finance committee meeting,
Okay.
and we'll do that with the template from a previous draft. That's #1.
When's the next finance meeting?
Let's continue.
But #2, as far as academics go, as much as I'm a fan of alt ed, we need to actually get those numbers, and I'm glad Dr. Day brought this up. We need to make sure that the educational quality of what's happening in the alternative education department is being met to a satisfactory level. So between that, finance, that's going to take a little longer, I understand. But just to start off with that template, and then we can also start backtracking with as far as we can with SOL scores from those who have attended the alternative education program. So these together are going to help us make decisions as to whether or not we keep alt ed, and that's going to save us a few $1 million right there.
Mr. Connor, I don't want to leave you out because you are behind us. Sir, do you have anything to add before I go to other members? Mr. Connor, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm trying to, apparently my headset has been disconnected. I might need to rejoin.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
And hear you.
Oh. Okay. Not at this juncture. I kind of agree with what Mr. DePaul was saying as far as we need, to look at some efficiencies.
Yes, sir. Mrs. Lowry?
Okay, so I have a few things. And Dr. Copeland, tell me if this is like not part of it, because it would be a base school thing, the HVAC at Laurel. Remember how we talked about that at a meeting? Should that be in our budget to get that fixed, or is that when she visited the schools, that would be a school thing?
That would have come in under a school thing.
Okay.
Or we'll
All right.
work with maintenance to figure out, but unless that's a
Okay.
heavy lift, it wouldn't be necessarily a budget add.
Okay, all right, that's what I'm sure. Also, one of the things they asked me at the city council, what would you do to help improve education? And one thing I found out my first year is we need to have the CVCC cap removed. I know you said that if you have a teacher that's coming around in the schools that's able to do dual enrollment, that's great. But if we don't, I mean, if we're limiting how many kids can get go to dual enrollment and get their degree before they leave, that's shortening, pushing education for our seniors and juniors that want to do dual enrollment. So if city council would give us the budget to remove that cap, it's just not there, and however many children want to sign up for it and they're able to do it, that would help the end goal that they are looking for, to have more students graduate with degrees and to do better. So that would be one of my asks. And also, if we could have extra SROs at middle and high school, I think that would help as well. And the last thing I have is for the building consolidation, because in my mind, if we consolidate, the teachers that will be moving around will be moving with their students or whatever, but as we'll need money to expand either classrooms, I don't know if we need to build a building, but we'll need to expand classrooms, we'll need to do something, and I would prefer not to put anybody in a trailer. Just keep everybody in the building. So those are my asks.
Other comments? CVCC cap, I think that's a good idea. It's just when you leave it open-ended, then the dollar amount calculation for budget becomes impossible. So, because if everybody signs in high school, then you got about 1,000 students. So if some cap is in mind, then we know where the upper ceiling on the dollar amount.
Does that cap come from the city?
No, it's within that's the budget item, right?
So, well, we're asking for, we want our budget. Well, let's raise that cap then.
Yeah.
So we've imposed that cap to stay within our budget.
But if we can ask, then let's ask.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Are we talking about early college, or are we talking about dual enrollment?
Dual enrollment, where they can take classes at the community college as well as their high school, and then graduate with associate's degree.
That's early college.
Oh, okay, well then early college.
Well, yeah.
Because dual enrollment is taking a high school class of which the instructor has been certified to also have it at a college level too, so that they have the credit when they leave high school that they can apply it to certain colleges.
Okay.
They don't get a degree from the community college for that.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Kinsley?
Well, I was just gonna say, there's the dual enrollment program that you're talking about, but just realize that the governor's new ruling for this coming academic year, 25-26, is that dual enrollment offered in the public school systems will not be charged anymore to the public school system. So students will be able to take dual enrollment at their high schools at no cost.
Okay. But you have to have a teacher that's qualified to teach that.
You do.
So.
And as far as caps goes with the early college program, since that's my world outside of here, I can tell you that that's a complex issue that requires a lot of coordination between the school system and the community college, because then you get into manpower issues. Like, I could not stand up a second cohort of LCS right now at CVC. I could not man it.
Okay.
So you got to, that's something you got to project well into the future so that I can hire faculty to teach those classes and things. Yeah.
Also, early college tuition is paid by the family, not by
Right.
LCS.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes supplement it through grants.
Correct.
But
And,
yeah.
and there is financial hardship,
Right.
forms and things like that. But early college is the responsibility of families.
Okay. All right.
Other comments? Looks like we're relying on you to provide us the information, and the moment you have it ready through Dr. Copeland, if you can share with the school board.
Absolutely, sir.
Mr. Connor, anything for?
No, just looking forward to my first budget excursion.
This is
You'll think differently after it's over.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
it's an interesting, because we got to make sure that we are careful. We deal with 80% of our budget is human resource. It means that breathing human beings we have as our employees. So when we make any decisions, when we make any comments during this discussion, we got to be careful that we don't create panic and anxiety in the community. We got to be mindful of that fact. The decision needs to be made, but they need to be made in the right way. And I hope we'll all work together with the administration to make sure what is good for the child. That's the bottom line.
How much of a monetary impact does Beacon of Hope have with the early college?
I'd have to look into that.
I mean, I know they provide, but I don't know the amount of money.
Are they providing grant, Beacon of Hope? Are they
I'm not
providing
aware of a
supports?
I'm not aware of Beacon of Hope supporting early college. Now, they may in terms of financial hardships and scholarships, but again, I don't know that. We can certainly reach out and see if they contribute to that.
Can we ask the Education Foundation as well?
Absolutely, and I don't think the financial hardship has been a burden for us. I think most families are able to pay for it. Those that are not, I think we've been able to absorb that in our budget. Again, I think it goes back to what Dr. Tinsley said about having the capacity at the school to offer the early college program. You know, he just stated he can't take any more students.
Ms. Pugh, what is our cohort size that we allow into early college every year?
That at
24.
20? Okay.
24?
24, yeah.
And that's from both Heritage and
Glass.
EC Glass.
Correct.
But again, you know, with the proper planning and forward thinking, you know, we can certainly stand up another, early college program. That's just a matter of manpower and space, and we can do that. But it's just something you have to plan for.
And the counties, I think, have up to 90 though. They have got way more students doing it.
No, the only county with 2 cohorts right now is Bedford County. They have 2
Yeah.
cohorts, so about, you can roughly say 24 each. So they're looking at about 48 to 50 students, but the other counties all have just 1.
Taking those courses help families financially because you're able to finish your general education courses when you're in high school.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So when you go to the college or university, you're taking only your major courses.
Yeah.
So, and general education, as per SACS, is about 48 to 54 hours out of the 120, 24-hour graduation requirement.
Yeah.
So that takes away significant financial burden at a higher price tag compared to
So the Transfer of Virginia program allows, so each of your associate's degree programs are anywhere from about 61 to 64 credit hours. And so Transfer of Virginia requires all public institutions in the state of Virginia to accept all of those credits. And so each one of the, all 61 to 64 credits do transfer to any state school. Most private schools in the state of Virginia are accepting a majority of those credits as well. So it's definitely a great program for students to get into.
most of the private schools have articulation agreements with CVCC and other community colleges.
Many of them are partners in the Transfer of Virginia program, yes.
So it does help families in long term in saving money.
Is
So
there something we can advocate for as a legislative advocacy committee
Yeah.
to make this better?
To make
To make the funding more,
Well, like Ms. Pugh said, the families are funding the early college program. And I guess to answer your question, I don't know if it's legislative help, but maybe partnering with Education Foundation, other folks that could provide grants and scholarships and things like that. That might be a way to.
So the current early college program was probably put in place in 2015, 2016, I think, maybe a little later than that. And it was modeled after what some of the counties had done. And it is focused on specific cohort sizes that can cycle through the community college experience, because they go to the community colleges in the morning and they're back at their base schools in the afternoon to take other classes. Many of them, that's when they might take their electives or their fine arts types classes. So it really gets to the heart of, if we want more students, like Dr. Tinsley said, we've got to start now planning for a year and a half from now, because we'll open the application window for programs like this, Governor's School Early College, in the coming months, early months of 2025.
let's say we had $1 million given to us for this expansion. What is the prospect number of students do you think that we could fill cohorts with in the next year or so?
I think that's a conversation we'd have to have with
Yeah,
CVCC, but again, it's staff and space.
No, no, no.
Hour.
To answer your question, if that $1 million dropped right now, you would not start the new cohort until academic year 26, 27,
Maybe
at
what
the earliest.
getting at the student demand is there.
That's correct. That's my, I'm asking that.
I don't know,
can
you know.
certainly work with Ms. Yeager and see how many applications we get on a yearly basis. I can find that out. I think the one place where we have a particular cap is the CTE Academy with CVCC. I believe that's 25 seats, so it's 12 or 13 at each high school. And that would be the one place that additional funding would allow more students to participate in those CTE courses that are offered
Maybe we should ask for that.
at the
then,
academy.
too.
So I think,
Jamie's.
if you're looking for something that's asking for more opportunity that doesn't have a cap, that would be the CTE Academy.
Okay, then I would request that.
Right.
I want to remove all caps for kids so they can go where they need to go and have a better future, so.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Copeland. Next one is review of the draft updates for Lynchburg Police Department School Resource Officer Memorandum MOU.
It's that time when we do the revisit to the MOU with the Lynchburg Police Department. Dr. Wodika has been working on it for the past couple of months. I think we're at the point of final resolution, legal reviews complete. Any comments you need?
Yes, sir. So we, as you know, have had a wonderful relationship with the Lynchburg Police Department for decades, and the governance foundation is this document that we review every 2 years. I can certainly go through those suggested changes as you wish, although you may not want to hear me read them to you over the next couple of minutes. But happy to answer any questions that may be there. Largely, I will say that we did, as we always do, a survey of the school community. We posted the agreement. Got feedback. We were responsive to that feedback and some changes that we were making that is noted in the document. We also made some adjustments based on current practice to be consistent with what we're doing, as well as added a couple of items in related to legal changes that just are things we're doing anyway, but we have into the agreement. So certainly would take any questions you might have about that document and where we may need to make changes.
Dr. Day.
I assume that, let's see, where's my comment here? That the SRO sergeant has reviewed all these changes. He's been involved in the discussions leading
Yes,
to
sir.
this.
So great question. So if I could follow up. So we have interacted with the SRO sergeant plus one of the deputy chiefs as part of this team, as well as our group. And then the police chief and Dr. Copeland have also reviewed it, as well as the city attorney's office.
So my only concern, the changes include in a couple places maybe some additional training.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to be sure that the increase of duties on the SROs is something that's manageable for them and that's not unreasonable.
Sure, great question. So an example might be the youth mental health first aid training. So that's a training that we do very frequently anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So they would be sort of a part of that. They were certainly amenable to that. Certainly not asking the police officers to do anything more necessarily in terms of their responsibilities in the school, other than to take that training, be aware of it,
Right.
understand what those issues are. The autism awareness kind of question as well. So the goal is here is to, again, focus in on making sure that we're creating a safe environment for our students. And just more training and education for our SROs is a great thing. Again, no specific problem that we've identified. There's no specific issue other than this is just a way to develop the relationship.
So they have received this training along with the teachers in the building or in the program?
That's right. Yeah, we will.
So how much an SRO costs to the school district in, and how much is the SSO?
So we pay, I think it's $50,000 per SRO, and the city sort of covers the rest. That's what the agreement says. And then the SSOs, depending on their experience, they're a little bit less than that in terms of salary, and then of course their benefits on top of that. So they're probably more expensive, a little bit more expensive to have an SRO than an SSO. Again, they play different functions. We're going to come back next month, talk a little bit more about SSOs and some of their roles and what they're doing. Both great parts of our school security program, but yeah.
Isn't the SSO totally funded by grants?
Right. Well, it is slowly becoming funded by the school division, so it's a multi-year grant. So every year we take on more of that responsibility.
Okay, thank you.
Because I know LPD is doing a great job and SROs are wonderful, but what happens nowadays with the shortage in staffing, they are called out to respond to, I call them 911 calls. I was at a school the other day, the SRO was called out. So if a fight breaks out, you don't have anybody from law enforcement. But the SSOs, it doesn't happen, they are there. And, or they cover the other schools. So, is there a plan to slowly migrate towards SSO, you know, from SS, knowing that they provide coverage for our kids?
Sure.
For the whole school, duration of the school?
It's a great question. So what I would say, so the answer, I would say no to that. And the reason is that the SROs and SSOs just play different functions. So certainly that school safety and security piece is a critical part of that. But there are law enforcement responsibilities that are related to the things that go on in the school that those SROs play an important part. As an example, I won't give any details, but there was a person who tried to sign into one of our schools today, shouldn't have been there. It was an opportunity for me to call and talk to the SRO sergeant to understand what those parameters are and those sorts of things. So, and they can play in terms of if there's somebody that does need to be charged, that sort of thing, which try to not have that, but it does happen. So if they play two different roles, certainly I think the continued development of the SSO program is critically important to the long-term safety of our schools. But I do think SROs do in themselves play a really important part of our school community.
The scenario I was presenting it, and I don't want Chief to get upset with me. If a fight breaks out in the school, the SRO has been called out 10 minutes before to that for a 911 call. The principal is left alone with an assistant principal. You see what I'm saying?
Without a doubt.
And by the time they call for a backup of SSOs, they may be, for example, it breaks out at Lincoln Middle, the SSO is RS Payne. It takes a good 10-15 minute drive to reach there.
Oh, absolutely.
They will call 911, the reinforcement will come. But knowing our SRO was pulled out, we know LPD is already short on staff on those calls. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
So, go ahead, Dr. Tin.
Do we have a sense of how frequently SROs are called out in these scenarios?
So I don't have data on that.
Yeah, yeah.
There's certainly, it is not infrequent,
Okay.
depending on the staffing and what's going on in the city. And I think the other really important part of the SROs is that they have because they're so tied into the rest of policing in the city, you know, our schools are microcosms of our larger community. And so having that information sharing, having that there is, I think, really, really important. And so totally agree with you. I mean, again, continuing to grow those ranks of SSOs will be tremendously important. I just think that the existence of SROs is also important.
It is important, no doubt. My data point is only one single data point. Go ahead.
Remember when the chief came here and you first presented that the SSOs would start with a particular school or two that were unnamed, and then they would grow and forth. You know, it's been a while now, and that was a type of promise. It was the goal and the focus. Every school should have an SSO with or without the SRO, right? That is the goal. It's unacceptable not to have them. They have to be in all the schools. I think that's what we want. I think that's what we want as far as safety, security, you know, plan A, plan B. We don't want just to rely on the principal and assistant principal on any given moment or event. Are you saying that this is not going to be the case? You said no.
Well, so I think his question was, are we going to replace the SROs with SSOs, right? And that the answer to that. So again, the intent is hopefully we'll be able to continue to grow that. You know, so it has grown from what it was originally. We're not covering every school all the time for sure. And that's certainly not where we want to be. But definitely want to have more SSOs. We'd love for every school to be covered all the time. That's a matter of, number one, of course, budget, but number two, it's about being able to actually hire the folks to do the work. And so we've done, I think, a number of things that have made the SSO program a lot more inviting to a lot of folks. The school board took action. We've armed them. We've gotten through that process. You know, a variety of other things that have gone on. So we're starting to see more of that, more of the positions be filled. But then again, it's just, you know, it's a staffing conversation.
Initial grant was $500,000, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yes, $500,000, so you can hire 10.
Yeah.
If you hire all 17, that'll add, finance about $800,000 of total cost as you're slowly transferring money. So it becomes a dollar issue, where will the money come from? But I understand SSO, I see more and more value in every school they are, because they are like big brother, father, you know, in that school district. They're armed. So, and
And I'll say, I think our particular folks have done such a tremendous job. I'm so proud of the work they've done. We'll hear more about it next month, but I think we've got a lot of the right people, and we want to make sure those are the right people. It can't just be anybody, off the street. And so, great points. I think we'll definitely, hopefully we'll definitely be able to continue to grow that. I'd like for that to be the case today, but that's where we are.
Dr. Day.
So the grant funding for the SSOs that is declining in steps. So we know what the additional cost to us for those for next year will be, and that's being taken into account in the budget calculations, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It'll be yes, I don't want to say a number, but.
Or so,
All right.
yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Walker, thank you, Dr. Copeland. Next one is a draft 25-26 school year calendar, Dr. Copeland.
We've got a draft of the calendar to present. Was it attached to the?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
So you will see that it mirrors closely this school year. We've got Ms. Phillips here to discuss it as she led the calendar committee. So we've got the expert that developed this year's calendar and worked on next year's to help us with your questions.
So I'll give you a quick little background. This year's calendar, we had a wonderful committee. There are teachers, administrators, parents of all the levels. We had transportation, HR, C&I, finance staff, just a whole a wide range of folks on the committee. This calendar was very different from the year before. So some of the big changes we had this year that we're currently in right now, we had the secondary schedules went from block to 7-period days. We took those elementary start times and those became split. Middle school started earlier. We added half days. Our calendar this year has 9 half days that are at the end of a interim or a quarter. And then we also added breaks, which people said they needed, fall, winter, and the full Thanksgiving week. So this calendar that we're currently living has 176 days, and we focused on the 990 hours instead of the 180 days. So we're still getting everything that everyone needs. But it's been a big change. So this current one that we're proposing is very similar to the one that we're living in right now. And the main reason, and we did survey some folks, and I'll definitely answer your questions, but we felt like we've had about 9 weeks of this calendar, a little bit more when we were surveying people, and we haven't really gotten a good feel for the things that we listened to our stakeholders last year and put into the calendar. They needed the breaks, they wanted a little more time, they wanted professional learning. So this calendar that we have for 25-26 is very similar. Some of the key changes that are different is in that first quarter, we took out a half day. People had said we got 462 staff member responses. We surveyed them and said, how did you feel about those half days? Did you feel like it was good for students? And 66% said they felt they were good, it was good for our students, but that first quarter was a little disjointed. We had Labor Day, and then we had some other days. So we took away one of those half days on this proposed calendar, and then that's on the 22nd of October. We made that a full day. So we didn't take away any days, but we did give our teachers a little bit more time with the students. We also took away December 6th. We just had a half day, which is at the end of the interim, but it's so close to winter break that we felt like that was a half day that teachers have been off of a week for Thanksgiving. Let's just keep the flow of the instruction throughout till the Christmas break. Most of the rest of the calendar really does mimic the exact same thing that we're living right now and wanting to hopefully reap the benefit of. We took one of the late winter breaks away. We had a 2-day, we have 2 days this year. We took one of them away, and then the 4th of June was going to be our last day of school, so we moved that back to the 3rd so that we kind of heard people didn't want to be out. They didn't want to be in school all the way into June, but we also want our teachers to have time for that professional learning. We want our students to have time to get the instruction, but we also want them to have some breaks so they don't feel just overwhelmed throughout. So that was the feedback we had gotten, and we felt like as a committee, we want to revisit this calendar in May survey the parents, survey the teachers, survey our students, and see how this year goes so that we can go ahead and start planning for the 26-27 year and maybe do what we had done in the past, which is do 2 calendars at once, because that really does help for our long-term goals and for planning. So that's the long version. So if you have questions, I'm happy to.
Mrs. Lowry?
I want to say thank you for keeping Thanksgiving next year for teachers, because that's fabulous. I thought it was always crazy we had to work 2 days. So it's like, I'm so glad that we kept that. That's good. Also, how did the split between the elementary schools, some going earlier than others, with the buses work out? Was it a problem? Should we go back to doing it different?
Hope with Transportation, she did come to the meeting, and she says that it's been fine. It hasn't been the full year, and so, the beginning of the year, they're always adjusting, and, I don't think every single bus is there on time every single day, but I do think that things are going well.
Okay.
That was not a specific thing that we wanted to address in a survey, because right now, the plan, I don't think, is to change that, because it seems like we're moving in the right direction. So to ask about something that is probably not going to be a change,
I was just curious.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought I heard you say December 6th was taken off, but that's a Saturday
Sorry, it was 6 this year, that's 5th.
this year.
This year.
Better glasses, but yes, the 5th, that's the end of the interim, and so typically we would do a half day, but since we would just be coming off of a full week for Thanksgiving, just going ahead and having those full weeks, instead of having a half day and then having the half day like this upcoming Friday. And this is the 19th.
Mr. Connor, do you have a question?
I'm not done.
Go ahead.
Right here, why is this,
Don't belabor me.
yeah, it's the wrong one. But this right here, this is in the middle of the week and this is early, so kids come for one day and then they're gone.
That's election day.
Okay. Yes, I'm usually gone by then, thank you. That's a good observation. And then the spring, we brought up the long spring.
The spring
Yeah,
break.
the 2nd of March on this calendar is our longer, that's our kind of late winter break. This year we have 2 days off in March instead of just 1. So we wanted to break up that February, March. If you've been in the classroom, it's a long time.
Yes.
So just to have a day where there's no professional learning, there's no parent-teacher conference, but to have a day where families could just take a deep breath and maybe stop some illness spreading and whatnot. And I didn't mention, we did also move our parent-teacher conferences to Mondays. We had them on Fridays, and what we found is, well, one, it was corresponded with the 10-miler and Friday night football in September. That Monday's a better night for parent-teacher conferences, because we can hit those folks at work during the day, and they can come in the evening. So we still did want to commit to the 2, one in September and then one in February, so that we can not only in September make those initial connections, but in February, if we need to have talks about retention, or if we want to help those parents really intentionally provide SOL remediation, or just review AP tests, some of those things that you want to talk about before it's too late. So we really felt like it was important to keep those. And you might notice February 9th is the Monday after the Super Bowl. It's kind of a nice coincidence.
Mr. Connor, do you have a question? We did it. Mr. Connor?
No, I just think it's great. I like the calendar, and I think because it's going to help, with my little being so close to transportation, we use those extra days that they give the teachers and no students, give the dispatch supervisors and dispatchers chance to make some adjustments that they need to make. So I like the calendar.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Now we got consent agenda. I have 3 items out, so we can discuss those now or after the vote. Let's vote on the consent agenda, and then we come back. There's a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Approve.
Minus those 3 policies, GC, IKFA, and DA.
Second the motion.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Jamil?
Yes.
Dr. Day?
Yes?
Dr. Gupta?
Yes.
Mrs. Preston?
Yes.
Mr. DePaul?
Yes.
Mrs. Laurie?
Yes.
Dr. Tinsley?
Yes.
Mr. Connors?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Right, now we come back to those three policies which will pull out GC, IKFA, and DA. I'll give you the floor, Dr. Day.
Okay, so GC, this is a human resources policy. And it begins by specifying requirements for teachers regularly employed. And the requirements are listed as 4 bullets. Now, it's not clear to me whether a teacher is expected to satisfy all 4 bullets or only 1 bullet. Between the 3rd and 4th bullet, there's an or. So the 3rd bullet says, holds a 3-year license to teach high school career and technical education in specified subject areas, or is hired to hire, teach, and so forth on the 4th bullet. So does the or connect, does it or mean the first 3 or the 4th? Or does it mean the 1st or the 2nd or the 3rd or the 4th? My point is it's ambiguous, and I'm not a strong advocate of one way or the other. I just want the policy to be clear.
Ms. Shipman.
All I can tell you, sir, is this is the recommendation that came down from VSBA. This is not anything that the policy work group has manipulated in any way, so that's why my recommendation was we leave it as is, because it's VSBA.
I'm not criticizing anything. I'm just saying I want the policy to be clear.
So I'm not a licensure specialist, I'll just open with that. But if you look at the last bullet, which is after the or, there is a specific licensure path for CTE instructors. So that's why they are characterized in a different statement than the other 3. The provisional license is a path to licensure that teachers get. The 3-year license is if you take somebody that comes out of a college education program, completes all their practicums, takes the praxis, applies for their license, they come in on a 3-year license. That's why you see the license, like the license that Ms. Lowry functioned under.
So an individual does not need to do both the first 3 bullets, just one or the first 2 bullets, just one or the other.
Correct.
So there should be an or at the end of the first bullet.
We will reach out to VSBA and see.
Now,
It's the board's policy. If the board chooses to add ors, we'll add ors.
I just want to know what the intent actually is, and I want the intent to be clear in the policy. And right now, I don't think it is.
So let's wait, they can go back to VSBA.
So if that's what we want to do, if we want to go back to VSBA and ask them to clarify, that's fine.
Next one is IKFA.
All right, IKFA, this is one we talked about some time ago about locally awarded credits, and my only issue here was that in our agenda, the discussion notes for this one say wording update on second option at end of the policy. It seems to me the, am I looking at the right? Yeah, the wording update is the same as our standing policy. Is there actually a change here?
Yeah, well,
Please explain.
yes. So when our committee met on September the 17th, there were 2 options. The first is the decision of the review panel will be final. The second option was, or the decision of the review panel can be appealed to the school board. At our school board meeting, when we first presented this policy, there were questions about, and let me take a step back. The policy work group recommended that we choose the second option, that an appeal could be taken to the school board from this review committee. At our school board meeting, it was then discussed about what would the appeal look like, and it shouldn't be an appeal based on fact, but more of an appeal based on procedure. So we took it back to the work group, and we were trying to come up with wording, and in that work group meeting in November, it was suggested that we send it to Attorney Towns for suggestions of wording. I sent it to her, and her response was, because there are no time limits in the policy, like it has to be done within 10 days, 30 days, whatever, and that the current language was very permissive, there is not a procedure that can be overturned by the school board. So her recommendation was to select the first option from VSBA, that the decision of the review panel will be final. So I then, after received her email, I sent an email to the policy work group explaining her answer, hence this is where we are.
So if we compare what's before us now to what is currently operative on board docs, is there a difference?
No, sir.
That's my point. That this is not a change of policy. We are just reaffirming our existing policy.
Correct.
That's what I wanted to be clarified.
Thank you. Who are on that policy?
Dr. Tinsley and Ms. Lowry.
And you got staff members?
Yes, I believe Dr. Davis was there in the conversation, Dr. Brown was there, so we have other staff members who attend that.
Thank you.
So I'm fine with this policy as we're seeing it now. I just wanted to clarify, was there a change that I can't identify here? And there
There
is not.
had been a proposed change, but then we took it back, so you're correct.
That's
This
right.
is, the
Okay.
policy is not changing from as it stands currently.
All right, all right.
This one is DA.
And DA. So this, this policy is talking about this board's management of funds, and it says near the end that the superintendent or designee is authorized to make line item transfers within a major classification. And my thought was, if the superintendent does make line item transfers within a major classification, that perhaps we ought to require that the board be informed.
Correct me if I'm wrong, the limit is 20,000, right? Anything more than 20,000 needs to come to board. Or anything 5,000. 5,000, yeah. 5,000 is the limit.
Well, that's not in this policy.
That's procurement, if I may. Those are performed within the same function via budget amendments. If there is a significant budget amendment that needs to be made, of course, it would come to the school board for approval. If it's minor budget amendments, just moving small amounts of money back and forth, usually the finance department does that within the administration of it.
So I'm just trying to make sure that that our policies, I mean, I understand that there needs to be a threshold below which a report doesn't need to be issued, and that's what you're saying.
Yes, sir. Yes.
And, but this policy doesn't say anything about reporting at all or a threshold. I want to, if there's other policies that whose effect would be if there was a change between line items that was above the threshold, whatever it is, 3,000 or 5,000. Are there other policies that would require this board to be notified?
There are. Who is on your financial policy work group?
It is Mr. DePaul and
Who's the second board member? Who's
I think
with you?
Tinsley.
Tinsley.
You mean financial facilities?
no, the policy.
Policy work group.
That's not
Okay,
me.
I can find it.
But do you want to send it back to the work group?
It may be Mr. Andrews.
Mr. DePaul, would you take it back to the work group and see? So we'll send it back to the work group to look at what the thresholds are. That's important, that you don't want to be transferring large amounts of money between the lines. So to keep that initial budget allocation transparent to the public, that there's no, so let's send it back to the work group.
Okay, then, as a consequence of the discussion we just had, I will move that we accept the proposed policies GC, IKFA, and that DA is being referred back to the work group for further consideration.
Okay. A second to that motion.
Second.
Mrs. Preston, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Jalil,
Yes.
Dr. Day,
Yes?
Dr. Gupta,
Yes.
Mrs. Preston,
Yes.
Mr. DePaul,
Yes.
Mrs. Laurie,
Yes.
Dr. Tinsley,
Yes.
Mr. Connors.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next one is the Ad hoc Superintendent Search Committee, Dr. Tinsley.
So we're still in the, I believe, pre-contract phase with the search firm, but we are knocking on the door of having a signed contract. I just haven't, it may be signed at this point, I just haven't gotten confirmation from procurement yet. Once we've got confirmation that it's signed, we will, co-chair and I will get together, start talking with the group about setting up our first meeting with the search committee to meet them, have an initial meeting. And then at that point, I've gotten queried by a couple of folks on the board. At that point, we'll get a timeline together, because that's like step one in this in the process with the search firm. Get a timeline together, and then of when we're going to be talking to stakeholders, et cetera, and so then we'll be able to get that in line. Because one of the questions is, when does the school board get to weigh in on what the avatar of our next superintendent looks like? And it'll be with the search firm when we get that timeline laid out. So we just haven't had that initial meeting. Until we have a contract, we can't have it. So that's where we are.
And once the firm is engaged, the community will start, engagements will start.
Absolutely. All that timeline will be published and marketed, and we'll get advertised so the public knows when those meetings are going to be and where they're going to be and what time and all of that. And we'll start having those stakeholder meetings, absolutely.
And you will work with Chair DePaul to work on the total cost of the project, including the travel.
Yes.
Because we don't have monies in our budget, right?
That's right.
So we got to ask
No
the
first-class travels.
Yeah.
Yes, once we know that, and once we can sit down and have a meeting with the search firm. But we are limited until we have that signed contract. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Just remind them that the committee will be with the firm whenever we go to those meetings.
Yeah, you'll be at that meeting.
Yeah.
Right.
So everybody knows.
Next one is Academic Success Committee, Mrs. Lowry.
Yes, I just want to give an update on the pamphlet. I've been meeting with we've got our list of our partners, business partners that deal with families from Miss Boyd. And I've been meeting with them in person, and I cannot tell you the wonderful, overwhelming response I've got. They're elated to not only receive it, the bulletin points, I've been told they'll put it on their TV screens, they'll share it with their mentoring when they meet with young people, young families, everything like that. So they're very excited to be on board with that. And I believe I read in our policies that we also, as the board members, are in charge of PD. So I'll bring it up with the Academic Success Committee, but getting some of those business partners in to do some PD with our, they've requested it, to meet with our teachers on some important points they would like to make for high schoolers and also from pre-K through middle. So I'll bring that through the Academic Success Committee, but the pamphlet they love it. They love it. So they love that we are really focusing on the children from birth to, 3 years old. And I told them this is an initiative that we're looking to see an improvement from, in 3 to 5 years. So if someone's pregnant now and they start doing all these bulletins and things that we have on here, helping their children, very basic, simple things that cost no money. So I just remember, though, that a couple decades ago, LCS said, your children don't need to know anything. We have all the tools. And as a first grade teacher, I'm like, that's terrible because that keeps a gap. So this way, we close that gap as much as we can. But I mean, everybody, just all the business partners absolutely love it, and they're elated to be part of this project. So,
You have a question? You're making an impact. Mr. Jalil is known as the guy who distributes Constitution, and you are the pamphlet lady.
Oh, I am, okay.
Every school I go to, they say, have you seen that pamphlet? No.
Yeah, okay, well, good, yes.
So that's wonderful. Thank you very much. Next one is Finance and Facilities Committee, Mr. DePaul.
Yes. We've come up with a couple approaches for efficiencies. The first is, of course, doing the best we can for our teachers, and we're going to be reviewing the benefits, especially the healthcare, and we'll do as much legwork before we present it or ask Ms. Jammies for her assistance. I know she's really laden down. The big thing that's going to draw the most attention, of course, is repurposing of T.C. Miller, and so that everyone can have the opportunity to look at the data. At the facilities, finance and facilities meeting, we had some graphics that showed that since T.C. Miller draws from all over the city, we can do more close to home to have those children, those students, in any number of, I think it was 4 or 5 different local elementary schools, and transfer or repurpose T.C. Miller to alternative ed. By consolidating all the alternative ed programs, we will reduce staff and teachers. As opposed to having 4 English teachers, we could reduce that to 1. 4 math teachers reduced to 1, et cetera, down through for the whole program. And taking a look at administration, we could have 1 principal over the same location. Exact numbers could be close to $1 million of efficiencies. That's, let me correct that, I'm saying projecting the possibility of having numbers close to $1 million. It's not exact, of course. We're also looking at the efficiencies of the alternative education department. Number 1 goal of this group is education. We need to make sure that the children coming out of the alternative education program are having their scores at the proper, where they should be. And if that's not happening, then we need to take a look at what is going to be more efficient. Taking into account if we don't have alternative ed as a brick and mortar, the virtual academy, which when I last checked was about $10,000 a student. With our ADM, we're looking at 60%, so maybe $4,000 a student that comes out of local spending. We could lose that ADM and use Liberty Online at about $2,200 a student. Even without the ADM, we would end up being in a positive situation, and that's something that we should investigate. And again, the numbers are not here for tonight, but I want to put it on the agenda, not for January, give you a break, but maybe February or March. Have that in on the agenda to having been reviewed by all interested parties, this board, all stakeholders, so they can see the validity and the deep dive that we took. Thank you very much for making sure that we don't just take things at the face value, and so that we can dig deep and we can see the benefits that are going to be much more thoroughly thought through for this endeavor.
Thank you for looking into it, because we always look for more ask, but we should also look for where I can squeeze my own budget.
Yes.
What you call the efficiency, doing
Yes, sir.
more with less. So that's a good thing. Mrs. Lowry, go ahead.
And also, with everything you said, I want teachers to understand, I feel like people are always saying, well, we'll lose our jobs, but children are still in the system. And I have co-taught, and I've talked to other teachers that have co-taught, and there's nothing better than having co-teachers. So the more adults you have in the room, even the better, and the better the children benefit too. So if we're consolidating, then teachers, you don't need as many there, you can put them somewhere else. Nobody needs to lose their job. So the more teachers we have helping the children, the better off we are. So I've never understood why people would lose their jobs. You use those teachers with other teachers, and you build that foundation for those children, give them what they need.
Any consolidation we do, we have to make sure we do our homework, do a review, involve community in those discussions.
Yes.
And the return on investment for some of these programs, that's as you said.
That's right.
Whether it's there or not, that's the key.
That even works on school buses if you have an attendant to help the school bus driver. It's so much safer and so much better.
I wanted to make the point that, well, you're going to bring more your analysis of this and the information that you've put together.
Considering nothing's been presented, absolutely.
That's right. I just want to make the point that we can't consider any major change to our facilities in isolation from all the other aspects of it. We can't, let's change this here without thinking about what the implications are going to be everywhere else. It has to be, I believe, a decision that looks at all the aspects of this. And Dr. Tinsley, I think you've made that point in the past, that we can't deal with these things piecemeal one at a time. So I just want to make that point. As the board members know, Dr. Gupta and I have written to the mayor and vice mayor asking that we can arrange for a joint meeting between us and city council to try to make some progress on our facilities planning. My perspective is that what we've been through in the past is we make a plan, but we can't do anything without the financial support of the city. So it goes to the city, and it either dies there, or they say no, or they don't like it. So it comes back to us, and so we scratch our heads and say, well, let's change our plan. And then that goes back to the city. Same thing happens again. We're playing ping pong, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And nothing gets resolved. And from what people have told me, this has been going on for a decade. I and Dr. Gupta have written this letter asking that we have a joint meeting with the City Council to try to work together on formulating a plan that both we think is workable and that the city is willing to support financially, rather than trying to plan two separate bodies that ends up going nowhere. Now we wrote on our behalf as individuals. We were not speaking for the full board. But as the chair and vice chair, it is our responsibility to plan the activities of the board, and that's why I feel it was appropriate for the two of us to write. And who knows what response we will get from the city. City council membership will change in the beginning of January, and they may feel very differently about this.
Go ahead, Mr. Paul, then I had something to say before I forget it.
The term, I've heard the term kicking the can down the road. And this has been going on, I understand that. And I just want to make sure people know that my committee is at least coming up with options and ideas. Getting a lot of support from Dr. Copeland and Dr. Woodica, and the numbers, and from Mr. Yarborough, the numbers are working. So even if they doesn't pass, even if the city council has some sort of agenda that doesn't coincide with us, we're doing our job, and we can push it back, and we're trying to make things efficient.
You know, and Mr. Hand is there, I should keep my mouth minimally open. But my frustration is that are our kids important? Because I see a deferred maintenance need of about $100 million in our school district. I got elementary school on 12th Street, which the HVAC system is down, right? They're using space heaters to heat the building. Is that RSPN? Is that true statement? The temperature is not up to the chillers. They need overhaul, and so there are buildings where we are putting these kids for their day-to-day learning experience are not optimal. And we are not asking for a fancy 5-star building. This is the basic needs of these kids, and they need to be met. And my frustration is last year, city had $15 million of surplus. 15 million. Guess how much Lynchburg City Schools got? $0 out of the 15. That tells me how important we are. This year, they'll have again $15 to $17 million of surplus. If they give me $2 million to redesign Sandusky, that's not meeting the needs of this current deferred maintenance. Maybe the chiller system in RSP needs to be replaced. You see what I'm saying? So why do we have to wait for year after year after year for these needs? And those are my kids, your kids, our grandkids who are attending these schools. As you said, Mrs. Lowry, they are risky, right, unsafe, and we cannot afford them to be there every day, day in, day out. Dr. Tinsley.
I'm curious, Ms. Jamie, that you may or may not know the answer to this question. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but it is a question that's in my mind. How much of the city budget percentage-wise is spent on the Lynchburg City School System?
28%. Like 28%, and Dr. Woodica has an analysis.
So we've done this every year, and a few years ago it was in the 28-30%. Most recently it's been low 20s, so it's declined.
And do we know how that compares with other?
It's lower, yeah.
Like Charlottesville,
40.
Harrisonburg, Great Roanoke.
Yeah.
Now, you go up to Charlottesville, I apologize, but when you go up to Charlottesville, some of their counties have 70% going towards their budget. But you're looking at I just said the numbers. So you're looking at a different overall scheme. Lynchburg City, and I want to say in defense of them, but it doesn't rationalize all of the decision-making. We have more services than the counties have. And we can go from welfare to welfare service, social services, mental health services, and we have a bus system that gets the people there. The counties don't have this.
Right. I was asking about cities, municipalities that are like comparable to us in size, like Harrisonburg, Charlottesville, Roanoke.
Yeah, I 6 months later, I can't tell you the exact numbers, but we are
28% last. But it was 28% if I remember, my memory serves, and the counties were in high 30s.
There's other cities
on their tax base.
Okay.
And see, the other issue is And I hear again and again the enrollments are declining, and I take it, enrollment are declining. But the population which is constant is your students on IEP. If you look at last 10 years of data, it's stuck at 1,000. 1,010 one year, 1,000, 1,009. That population is a high need because students pay. My own daughter was 1-to-1 in Lynchburg City Schools. I'm only one sample point, 1-to-1. You're paying about $60,000 for a teacher based on an IEP to teach her. So people need to look at, as Dr. Day said, for facilities, a complete plan, for enrollment, a complete plan. Behavior issues we have, private schools don't want them.
Yeah.
Are we going to leave them on the street?
Yeah.
No. We got to take care of them.
Yeah.
So are we the school of last resort? Maybe, but then we got to fund those. You see what I'm saying? So the people need to understand those behavior kids sometimes need 2-to-1, 4-to-1. Those who have been teachers, you understand, Mrs. Lowry and Mrs. Preston, better than anybody, require more resources. And when they require more resources, those numbers go up. They may be IAs, they may not be teachers. So the numbers look higher, but the needs are higher because the kids we have, some of them, private schools will not take them. I wish they can take them, right? The money follows the student. So those are the things we need to discuss in budget as we move forward, is to, are we taking care of our kids or not? In a safe environment, and including the efficiencies we need to make sure we are doing the best at our end to provide the most with the least amount of resources, but are we effective in doing our job?
I think that, well, let me ask a question first. When are you feeling like that meeting is going to take place between the school board and city council?
I can't predict what the city will do. What the letter said is as soon as possible.
Okay, well, they're obviously going to have a meeting, because that would be really frowned upon if they didn't. If you asked for a meeting, I can't imagine that they would refuse. But my point is that in having these conversations, that we need to develop a plan that's going to capitalize on just some of the things that you've said. Because it's, if all we talk about is the dollars and cents, okay, yeah, well, we can just not give you the dollars and cents, and that'll save the city money. And on the surface, that sounds like a good idea. But when we think about the fact that there are children in this community who are not going to be educated, who are then going to be receivers of services, we need to consider those things, because we need to capitalize on the positivity of the message that you're sending, and hopefully on the positivity of the people that are sitting in those chairs, because they're going to want their kids to be educated, and their grandchildren, and their neighbors, and so on and so forth. And as much as we may disagree with people, most of us as parents are going to say, yeah, I want the best for my kid,
Of course.
regardless of what the other circumstances are. So I think we need to make sure that we go in with a positive message so that it will be seen in the way that we want it to be seen.
Well, I wanted to commend Mr. DePaul and the Finance Committee for putting together some ideas. I think that's been one of the problems with the board in the past, particularly through the whole MGT period. We received lots of information, but as a board, we didn't know what to do with it. We just took it in and had nothing to say about where we're going to go.
But it's positive ideas too. There are positive ideas from the things that they were suggesting. They're not things that anybody is just going to say, oh, no, don't do that.
So I'm saying thank you for putting together and putting the effort into, we haven't seen, at least I haven't seen the details yet, but I think putting some initiative into grappling with the details and where are we going to go from here is important. We haven't had enough of that.
Dr. Tinsley?
Yeah, I think something that's been on my mind for a while, and I really feel strongly about this. I hear, constantly from different sources, declining enrollment, declining enrollment, declining enrollment. And that's kind of a mantra that I've heard since I've been on the school board. I don't want to resign ourselves to that trend. You know what I mean? Like the enrollment is declining, but that doesn't mean it has to continue to decline. It doesn't mean it has to be who we are until we get to zero, right? So, I think part of our messaging, to Ms. Preston's point, is, if we do the things on our end to be fiscally conservative, efficient, if you will, The city comes along and does what they can to support us, and we enhance the quality of our schools and invest more in our schools. Maybe we can arrest that trend and turn it around the other way. When we can give the public confidence in our public school system, then they'll be more apt to put their kids in the public school system. So I'm just not one to say, oh, we got declining enrollment, that's just the way it is. No, it doesn't have to be the way it is. And I'm hearing from the board tonight that message. I mean, I think we're all in accord there, but I want the public to know that that's my heart, and I think that's the heart of a lot of people on the board. Yes, enrollments are declining. Yes, we've been in kind of the dark ages in some ways, but that doesn't mean we have to stay there.
And that's why it was the pamphlet and
Exactly.
pushing children and helping parents and saying, listen, do this, raise that bar, and it'll be better for everybody.
See, all those people have said, don't be a problem finder, be a solution provider.
Exactly.
You gotta be coming with solutions, and Dr. Day with his ad hoc committee last year worked very hard, and with Mr. DePaul and who else was on your ad hoc committee, to come up with discipline policies which create a conducive learning environment in our schools. This year, now we are forcing enforcement of those policies. So we, as a board, have taken action or steps to make sure that we lift or provide at least teachers an environment where they can teach, they are not cussed at, or there no physical violence in the school system. So board has taken strict policy measures to make sure those things are there. Now the enforcement is being watched through our discipline committee. So there are actions and steps taken. I agree with you, and that the steps needs to be in terms of solutions. Mr. Connor, I don't want to leave you out. I know you're, I see that,
Yeah, I just want to say sometimes we forget the animal in the room, the elephant or whatever they say. We have a big need, and I think that's what Mr. DePaul and Dr. Tinsley, in reference to alternative education. And I think with the discipline and the policies we put in place, it's making a better environment in our schools, but at the same time, we must help those children as well. And I think part of the solution that has been discussed in the finance and facilities is more about meeting the needs of those alternative ed students so that they can become a more positive part of the entire education environment. Because right now, what we're seeing on a weekly basis, the policies are being enforced on the front end, which is what we want, but we also need to make sure that we are also providing the support that these children need to get them back to a positive place in the school system. So I think that's one of the things we've been looking at real hard, and I'm glad that Mr. DePaul is going to be bringing forth some support documentation of how overall this will affect our system, because I think it will even help with our SOL scores and some of the other efficiencies that we need to see. So I'm real supportive of what's taking place in discipline and in facilities.
yes. Mrs. Lowry.
And I want to thank Dr. Copeland, because I have seen the bell-to-bell thing in some of the principals' emails, newsletters, so the word is getting out. It's definitely getting out. And and from an educational standpoint, for the alternative education, I think those children should be taught by those teachers there, and they should be their teachers, not going back to the home-based teacher, because that's a lot of pressure on a teacher who doesn't see a student at all. So I think when that adjustment is made in education-wise, we need to also make that adjustment. So yeah.
I, for one, has asked for, and Dr. Copeland is working on it, the SOL scores for that subgroup. Students in alternate education, how many of them are going back to base school? Are they learning in that alternative education school or not? Or are we just creating a medium security prison for these kids
Yeah.
to be just away from the regular classroom.
And when teachers talk to me, they're not passing, so it's tough. So I think it's because you're trying to go from this teacher to this teacher, just have whoever they're in front of, that's their teacher. That's their teacher.
Relationships.
Mm-hmm, yeah,
Relationships.
mm-hmm,
So those are the part of the bigger discussion.
yes, yeah, another time.
Finance and facilities will have is to make sure when we put resources in a unit, it's giving us some positive impact in terms of learning outcomes. And so, thank you very much. I think we had a constructive discussion. There are some informational items. Next school board meeting is Tuesday, January 7th at 5 p.m. Discipline Committee data review is January 9th at 3:30. Finance and Facilities meeting is January 14th at 3:30. LACR is January 21st at 3:30. Next school board work session is January 21st at 5 p.m. And Academic Success Committee is January 28th at 3:30.
And I would like to make for that active success committee meeting, Dr. Day and Ms. Preston will be in charge of that, leading it and stuff, because I will still be in Chile and I won't be back until the 30th.
And before we forget, Dr. Day suggested that we talk about choosing another school board meeting before the budget meeting on the 7th. And the only day that I saw on the calendar was the 2nd of January.
Yeah, I don't think we agreed that that was feasible.
I don't remember.
We just hadn't discussed it. We never discussed it.
That was,
I raised the idea, but the board,
we didn't discuss it.
you know.
All right, so have a happy holidays and happy new year. See you in a year.
So, yeah. See you next year.
See you next year.